Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the GALA webinar series. My name is Manuela Noske, and I'm the Communications Manager here at GALA. GALA is a global nonprofit trade association supporting the language industry. We're headquartered in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. And today, we're going to have a presentation from Jasmin Jelača from Nordeus. We're so pleased that each of you joined us from various locations all around the world to participate in this event. I will hand it over to Jasmin in just one moment, but first I have a few housekeeping items that I'd like to go over. So first of all, we have muted everyone's lines to cut down on any background noise. If you experience any technical difficulties, you can let me know by using your chat box, and I will work with you to troubleshoot them. If you have a slow internet connection, your audio may be disrupted. If that happens, you can use the number listed on the GoToWebinar panel to call in using your own phone. We are making a recording of this presentation, and you will be able to find it following the presentation on GALA's global website. All participants will receive a link. Jasmin will answer your questions at the end of the presentation, but please feel free to type them into your chat box throughout the webinar to get them into the queue. We will get to as many questions as we can with the time remaining at the end of the session. Before we begin, I'd like to take just a few moments to introduce Jasmin. Jasmin Jelača is a localization lead at Nordeus, which is an award-winning independent gaming company based in Belgrade, Serbia. Having been raised in the multicultural environment of Berlin, it was pretty unavoidable that he became a specialist in various languages and cultures. Jasmin went on to study German literature in Belgrade, and after freelancing as a translator, he found his new home at Nordeus. Currently, he works with different departments such as marketing and customer relations, making sure Nordeus players enjoy top-notch localization quality in every facet of the gaming experience. So now, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jasmin for the remainder of the session. Jasmin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Manuela. Thanks for the nice introduction. So, hi to everyone listening. My name is Jasmin, or Jazz, however you want to call me, and I'm the localization lead at Nordeus. And today I want to talk about the importance of the timely involvement of localization and the product lifecycle. So before we get started, just a short question to think about, no reply needed. Who of you is part of the product strategy? So who is setting the product strategy together with product managers and with the marketing managers? And does localization have a say in that strategy at all or not? And if not, why is that so? This is important because this got us started with thinking about how we do things and why we do it that way. So the agenda is a bit wide for today's webinar, but I want to make sure that we focus on three things only. The first one is how to be there on time when the strategy for the product is being determined. The second one is how to have clear localization requirements and how this helps in your day-to-day activities. And the third one is how to make sure to collaborate properly with all different departments in your company and with all the stakeholders you have in order to go the extra mile and make sure you offer great content to your players or users. And going the extra mile is something that we really love to do. We have 160 awesomely talented people in our company who love playing and making games as well. We have two products left. Just to give you some context about Nordeus, our flagship game is Top 11. Top 11 has over 170 million registered players, and our brand ambassador is Jose Mourinho, probably one of the most famous football managers in the world. And Top 11 is available in 30 languages, and going through so many iterations really helped us enhancing the localization strategy for a new game, which is currently in soft launch, Spellsals. Spellsals is a mobile PvP game. I guess I share many attributes with you guys who work in localization. We care about delivering impeccable service to our users. We care about making our products globally available. And we care about having flawless processes in our company. And this is what I try to do every day with my team. So this is the Nordeus product lifecycle. It's divided into 6 phases, and every phase has a certain goal, a certain expected duration, and deliverables that need to be done by the production team, but also by the marketing team. So the first one is called ideation. And in ideation, we experiment, we run different tests, we try to create the vision of the game, and we establish a team and develop early game prototypes. While this is happening, the marketing team is already working on the market requirements, trying to segment the market to make sure we're targeting a user base that would actually play this kind of game. The second phase is called pre-production, and this is divided into 2 parts. The first one is all about proving that the core play is fun, and we start working on the art direction as well. The deliverable on the production side is a demo, which is basically team internal playable demo, and also the game design documents are more or less in place. From the marketing side, we already start testing the gameplay externally. We also work on points of differentiation and points of parity. During the second phase of pre-production, we want to prove that the gameplay is actually working, and this can last from 3 to 6 months. The final deliverable there from the production side is a company playable, which we call alpha, and we make sure that we know the scope that we need to go forward. On the marketing side, we're already working on the branding and on market insights. The next phase is called production. And in production, we have a high quality game that is ready for the public. There we have the beta, and depending on the beta results, we either move forward or push it back into production again. There we also have 3 minutes of gameplay proven to be working, and the localization rate. And from the marketing side, we have the soft launch strategy in place, trademarks, and other integrations are already being worked on. The soft launch is a very important milestone. This is actually opening yourself to the market. It's a limited market, but still, you get real data starting from this point. So here we do A/B testing on different things. We switch the gameplay a little bit, try how it works with version A and then with version B, obviously, get the data and create the product strategy around that. And on the marketing side, we're already working on measuring the lifetime value, the cost per install, and other market KPIs. Live 1 means that the product is now out of soft launch and is moved to the App Store and to the Play Store, to a much bigger market. Not the whole stores, but a very big market. And the production deliverable there is very easy. Let's just pass out from alcohol. And the marketing deliverables are that we get a local featuring, so not a global featuring on the mobile stores, but a local featuring. And analytics are set in place, and user research is being taken into account while developing the product further. And then Live 2 means that the game is available globally. So this is, again, how it looks like for us at Nordeus. And now my question would be, and also just something short to think about, where you see localization happening here. So for us, it starts in the very first phase, which is ideation. So together with marketing and our vendors and local experts, we check the market requirements in order to ensure that similar games are played in certain markets. This is an important first step because we want to make sure that we have impact on the product strategy, and we're kind of able to guide how the product and where the product is going to be headed. In pre-production, obviously, things get more traction for us. So we start a collaboration with game design on the design documentation, so talking about glossaries, style guides, the tone of voice for supporting community. We define personas together with the marketing team and utilize them to even further enhance the design documentation. We make sure that the technology is in place for translations and LQA, or localization testing. In this phase, we also define the soft launch and the full launch countries and start with internationalization and UI passes. We also work on the App Store optimization, and we work with our user research team and so on. So our product management team is so it's product managers and it's product marketing managers. Both of them are equally important to us. So product managers are the ones who define the technical requirements, what devices are needed, on which operating systems our games will be available, what KPIs we're going for, and what can be done from the technical side in order to make our lives and the lives of our testers easier. Product marketing managers, on the other hand, are the ones who set the go-to market strategy. They find markets with low cost per install, so they can experiment with different user acquisition models, talking, for example, horizontal versus vertical trailers. So all those things have impact on the user acquisition metrics, and we work with them on making sure to see what works best. These interactions with them helped us to decide the countries we want to have for the soft launch. So as you can see, there are some of the usual suspects there, like Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Netherlands as well. And some input we gave to them was actually the English proficiency of all these countries, because soft launch, it is a big milestone, but it is not a huge deal from a localization perspective, because during that phase, we need to be able to react to KPIs very fast. And there's no need to translate the whole game all the time. So what we did here was that for all languages, we could just use English as the source language, but only for Taiwan, we needed to go with Chinese traditional because the English proficiency is quite low there. So once the strategy and roadmap are in place, the time comes to start thinking about the documentation that is necessary to localize a game. So there's the normal stuff that you can see as the style guide and the glossary, but also general info and linguistic profile that we need from our vendors. So all of this information was shared as soon as it was available with our vendors, just to help them get the right people for the game, get the right skill sets, the translators. But also for us, it was important because we could steer the style guides, the glossaries, and so on in the right direction. It wasn't only game design who was working on it. It was us in collaboration with them. And so now we're at the point where we have the documentation ready, we have the localization strategy ready, we have analyzed the markets, and we know which tools we're going to be using. So we could just go ahead and start translating, right? But no, we were wondering whether there's something else we could be doing. And at Nordeus, we try to test everything with our players. And of course, our user research team loves this approach. So we put together a small questionnaire that eventually became a part of one of their researches, where we asked our target segments what sort of inbox messages they prefer. So were they like long story types of messages, or just short, concise bullet points with we've updated this to this, this to this, and so on. And once we got all the data, we adjusted that documentation, and we could call it complete. There's also more things we like to do with our user research team, and they really appreciate the extra work. So one more effort is personas, and personas are mostly utilized for marketing purposes, but we managed to find a way to use them in our localization strategy. So we have 3 personas in Spellsource, and the question is how to make sure that the text is adapted to all of them. So what we did was we tried to find replies that were pretty much in common for all of them. And one thing that you can't really argue is simplicity. So you can see it in many big titles on the mobile stores where the text is presented at a bare minimum. And that's great, because inside the game, you need to keep it as simple as possible. Outside of the game, you can go in depth. And this is what actually all 3 of our personas really wanted. So it's really important to not interfere with what marketing and so is doing, but actually work with them together in order to enhance the user experience. And speaking of user experience, there's of course no better way of enhancing it than adapting it to our local markets. of course, we as localization experts really want to make sure that we are able to go the extra mile with this. So the first effort was to make sure that the name of the game is localized properly, and not only for traditional Chinese, but also for simplified Chinese. Because having in mind that simplified Chinese will be one of the full launch languages, we try to keep consistency even way before we would actually proceed with translating the game for the full launch. So this is what we did for not only for the name of the game, but also for spellcasters. So the angry guy that you can see there, we also checked with local experts whether the name is great or not, again, together with the user research team. So when it comes to internationalization itself, there were many issues we found. So one of the efforts we did was to actually implement a completely new Chinese font together with our team and the UI team, making sure that the font works within the game vision and within the style of the game. Of course, we ran into some issues. As you can see here, there was too much space for numbers, so we had to actually hack the font and decrease that space. There were also some display issues, of course, that were fixed. But the great thing was that we managed to catch them all well before we actually went ahead and translated it into way more languages than just 2. This is also a very interesting topic, and this was also one of the reasons why we chose Taiwan over mainland China, because spells and artwork, it's a bit dark fantasy, so the setting is a bit dark, as you can see here. So the problem was obviously skeletons, blood, gore, all of these things that are forbidden in China. But luckily for us, in Taiwan, they're not. So we decided to just keep it like this, and also having in mind that we need to move quickly, especially during the soft launch, we decided not to change the artwork, but we knew that eventually when the time comes to go to China as well, we need to change this. So the good thing there is that we also well in advance were able to list all of the things that needed to be changed in case we really want to go to China properly. So let me talk a little bit about the metrics that we use and what we do for QA. So when it comes to measuring QA for translation, so for translation quality, we're still using the Lisa QA system. We've adapted it to our needs and according to the style guide, so different points are given for different types of errors. So we're not using just the default Lisa methodology. I know that many think that this is old. Yes, it is old. But we still feel that this is giving us good results, and we have our internal benchmarks, and this works really well. The goal for translation was something that we had, but that we took as from the experience of localizing Top 11 so many times. So Top 11 is a game that has updates every 2 to 3 weeks in 30 languages all the time. And then we took some of the best practices, obviously, that we have from Top 11 and put it into spell souls as the goal for translation. For localization testing, the goal is pretty easy. So we have a certain percentage of verified fixed bugs that we want to have. So the maximum, for example, can be 5% of bugs with severity M or higher. So this could be one of the goals. And this is something that's pretty easy to measure and pretty straightforward, and the team is well aligned on this. So this works really well for us, and this is something we do also for Top 11 and in general when we do LQA. When it comes to for the requirements for the development team, so in our intranet, we have very big pages with documentation, and there you can find everything. So when pre-production started, we basically collected all the tools that we will need to be using, all the workflows that we need to have, basically all the suggestions for our developers, how to do things, how not to do things. So let's not hard code strings, and let's make sure we check the UI before you push strings to us. Let's make sure we have consistency checks before that. And then also we are using some tools internally that have been developed internally for our own usage. So they are connected to some of the tools that you can find on the translation market. And the good thing there is that we are very agile with publishing latest localization versions. So basically for us, we have a technology where we can just, with one click, publish the new localization files for the game. So there's no need to actually submit the build to the App Store, to Apple, wait for the review, and then there's an update. We can actually, every time a player logs into the game, the player downloads the latest localization file, so we can change those whenever we want. And this is really good if you get feedback that there are typos in the game or something is broken. This really helps you being agile. So when every next time our users log in, they always get the latest localization files. And when we were working on the Spell Souls soft launch, we managed to meet those goals that we set. Obviously, there were a few that we didn't manage to meet. For example, for the translation goal, the translation for Chinese was really good, but it was below the benchmark, so this was quickly fixed. But it's always good, obviously, to keep an eye on all of these things at all times. And this is how it looks when the game is live. So the first thing we do, and this is way before development starts, is we have access to Google presentations, because this is where our game designers work together with UI and UX team. So in a presentation, they put all the wireframes, all the screen proposals, and so on. And then there is a step that's called localization feedback or localization sign-off. So even before development starts, we are giving feedback on the UI, making sure that all the buttons fit, all the text fits, that the text is within context, and all of these things. And then we go ahead and start with the string preparation and the translation. So once the UI is signed off, developers get the strings and they push them to us. So once we receive them, we once again go through all the string descriptions, go through all the character limitations, make sure that the files are well prepared and they are ready for translation. And then once we get the translations back, again, with one click, we just publish them on our test builds. And we do a quick round of sanity checks, making sure that we catch all the errors and all the mistakes. So we started doing sanity checks early this year, and it's really useful because one time we managed to reverse the font to the how's it called, generic Unity fonts. So for top 11, and so 6 fonts, so Chinese, Japanese, Russian, Korean, and then Hebrew were reverted to the generic Unity fonts, and they looked very bad in the game. So this is something that we managed to catch during sanity check, and we didn't publish this into production, which is obviously great. So this really helps, and this is more or less the workflow that we have. If it's a very big release, something that we've been working on for 2-3 months in the background, we also do LQA before we do sanity checks. And this is basically how every release looks like for us. So every 2 to 3 weeks, we go through these 3 steps and then repeat. For example, for the UI reviews in Spell Souls, these are things that we caught. So imagine that you're opening the game, you're navigating through the menu, and you enter a screen that is called Guild. And then you have a button there that says Join Guild. And now imagine this needs to be expanded with 20 or 30% in German or in French. So it probably won't fit there. But there is no need to say Guild, because you're already in the guild menu, so it can just say join, because it's quite clear that you will join a guild there. There were also other things like total victory points that could have been just shortened to points, and then rewards as well. So there are things that we catch all the time that can be avoided. And the good thing is that also game design, but also UI guys and developers as well, they are educated more and more with these things, so those things happen less and less. When it comes to string preparation and translations, for example, here's another one, delete guild could just be delete. And also the text could use some love, some nice English pass there as well. And for the sanity checks, there are functional issues that we can catch. So for the location, for example, or you see the text below the search button, which is also not ideal, obviously. So if there are 3 things that I want to point out from this presentation and this webinar, it's never too early to get involved as a localization representative. People will usually see you more down the line, but obviously it's a tremendous advantage to be aware of all the product decisions and be able to act upon those as well as influence them. To have a clear localization strategy helps a lot with decision making. So you need to know where you want to play in order to keep the focus and close the door for scope creep, which can always happen. If you know anything about product management, this is one of the big threats there. And then sharing. Briefing your vendors and allowing them as much insight as possible can only help. It helps with getting the quality you want. It helps with alignment on the bugs you want to have logged. It definitely helps with receiving cultural advice as well. So make sure to share everything you have. Don't be afraid of breaches and so on. Take care of this first and then share. Create the profiles for linguists, share the strategy docs, explain the quality bars, and just give them all the right tools for success and for collaboration. So this is it from my side. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Jasmin, for this interesting presentation. So I think a key question that must be on everybody's mind is, it's clear that localization is really well integrated at Nordeus into the product lifecycle, right? You're deeply embedded. How did you get there? So instead of localization being an afterthought, it really is front and center at Nordeus. How did you make that happen?
Yeah, that's it's been a fight. It's pretty much showing everyone who's involved in production, not only product managers, so you don't only start from the top, but also the developers, the designers, QA guys, everyone basically who is involved, how it will benefit them, making sure that doing the things right in advance will minimize all the bugs, all the issues we're having, all the things that happened in top 11. So it's not that something that we just took from theory and then implemented it in Spellsource. We had all of these things happening in top 11 and we managed to fix them eventually. So we wanted to take all these learnings and put them into Spellsource. We also had different presentations for our developers, how to write proper string descriptions. We had different presentations for game design on how to make sure that internationalization will be done properly. And then lastly, we also had showed what is the cost of not taking localization into account from the very start and how much it costs to actually fix all those bugs, how bad your product looks like in certain markets. And it doesn't look like a premium product, which is obviously how you want your product to look like. It looks like, I don't know, you put something together quickly and just shipped it on the market. So there are many layers on how you need to approach different people. But at the end of the day, it's always the most important one is make sure you're there in advance so that afterwards, because afterwards is very difficult to fix things.
Yes.
You have localization bugs, you have functional bugs, you like which ones will be fixed first, I guess. So it's always great to be there in advance. And it's basically about human communication and making sure that you live and breathe localization during lunch, during, I don't know, in the hallway, wherever, like just few things here and there that will just keep them thinking about this, and then eventually you get to a point, but you really need to be persuasive.
Yeah. So really what you're saying is that it was a journey to at Nordeus, right? It took the influencing and the convincing. Yeah. Very good.
Of course. Those are years.
Yes. We have a question here from Russia. The question is actually two. What's your favorite CAD tool? And then how did you make the decision to do community localization for top 11 from the beginning?
Okay, my favorite, I don't have a favorite CAD tool, to be completely honest. We're basically using a content management system for string management. So our vendors are using the CAD tools, and we have shared TMs, so we have access to it. But we stopped using CAD tools a year and a half ago. So we just moved to creating internal tools and using a CMS that is available everywhere and deeply connected it to our system. So I don't really have a favorite CAD tool. And then the second question was a community translation for top 11. Yes.
Yeah. How
did
just to repeat it, so how did you make that decision to do a crowdfunding community look way?
Yeah, so when I came to Nordeus, we were already working with the top 11 community on the translations. So I'm not sure how the decision was made, but we saw that the quality is not the greatest, and we saw that it's very difficult to manage. You would need to have many more in-house people to handle that, because community translators are not like professional translators in that sense that translation is their main thing that they do. They like to play the game and so on. So the communication with them is not always the best. If you have tight deadlines and if you're at the very end of the waterfall, then it's very difficult to get all those translations in. So we use different systems. Back then we used, the community, but we also used services like one-hour translation and so on. But eventually this was not something that was scalable. So we decided to move on to vendors.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And we have one follow-up question on the CAD tools. One of our audience members would like to know what drove your decision to stop using CAD tools internally?
Mm-hmm. Basically, the decision in the team was that we don't want to. So we have localization coordinators in the team, but we don't want them to coordinate translators. We want them to be advocates for localization within the company. And this is our mindset. So the main thing for us is that they are in day-to-day communication with our vendors who are in charge of getting the translations for us. So there was no need for us to have a CAD tool in the first place.
Okay. Then we have a question here that you may not be able to answer, but somebody's curious to know if you have any plans to port your top 11 game or bring it onto a PC platform. If that is too sensitive, then
it's available. It's available on Facebook and on top11.com. You can play it from your PC.
All right. Okay, cool. So then one other question is, what's your number one localization challenge at Nordeus?
Oof, that's a good one. I would say it is still making sure that you're there at the very beginning for the new projects that come up. Mm-hmm. So you always need to be aware of everything that's going on in the company, and sometimes you're just not in that position. Sometimes marketing and producers are obviously more important for the product, which makes complete sense, but you need to be able to have a say in that conversation. And this is something you just need to push yourself and push them to make sure that this is happening, because information can get lost. Even in a small I would still say it's not the biggest company in the world with 160 people. So even in a smaller company like this, it's possible that communication gets lost and information gets lost. So it's important to follow up.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then one last question here around KPIs. What KPIs do you have, and what do you measure when you add new languages?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mentioned that marketing team is doing the market segmentation, and then there is this thing that is called total addressable market. So based on that total addressable market, we project what would be the number of daily active users and how the retention numbers will look like. And based on those projections, we decide whether we should localize there or not. There's also industry data that is available, for example, on App Annie, where you can check how many players from on what language play certain apps. So you can check your competitors, if I can call them competitors. And then based on this, you can create projections on what could happen if you localize your game into Arabic, let's say.
Mm-hmm. All right. Unless there's more questions from the audience, and I don't see any coming in, then I would like to thank you for your presentation today. But if anybody is left with any unanswered questions, then you can certainly enter it into the survey that you will receive when you log off from the webinar. Jasmin, thank you so much for doing the presentation today. Do you have any closing words for the attendees?
Basically what I mentioned, those three things that I mentioned in the end were my closing words. So just make sure to share. I know that companies still have a problem with sharing information, especially with other companies or vendors, but at the end of the day, your client, so it's okay to share. And you just need to set them up for success, because internally it's very difficult to be successful. So you need a lot of outside help. And that's it. Yeah. And always push to be there on time and show how important it is to fix things in advance versus after they've already gone live.
Cool. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Jasmin, and a big thank you to all our participants for joining us. We would really appreciate it if you could take just a minute to give us your feedback on today's session using the post-event survey. It's really quite short, but your perspectives help us to continue to refine our webinar program. With that, I will wish you a good day or a good night, depending on where you are, and I look forward to seeing you at another GALA webinar soon. Thank you.